Hello, 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 hello. It is I, Dr. Campbell Price, Curator of Egypt and Sudan at Manchester Museum, joining you exclusively live because it is, of course, the last Thursday of the month. So that can only mean one thing, and that is Egyptology Live. I know I am streaming on YouTube fine, but I don't seem to be connecting. Oh, I am. Oh, am I? Am I connecting on Instagram Live? This is a big question. I hope I am. But technical issues being what they are, one never knows. So let me just try that again. Hi, everyone. Okay, now I think I'm both on Instagram Live. Hi, Instagrammers, and live on YouTube. So welcome. As I just said to people on YouTube, because it's the last Thursday of the month, it's 2 p.m. UK time. It means Egyptology Live with me, Dr. Campbell Price, Curator of Egypt and Sudan at Manchester Museum, speaking to you exclusively live from the storerooms of Manchester Museum. So today, I am delighted to say, very exciting day, we have our first in-person researcher working in the collection just next door, working with Middle Kingdom Stele, and it's great to actually get that in-person discussion going again. So very exciting day. I ask always in advance, do you have any questions? Because surely, to goodness, people have burning issues and unresolved inquiries that they wake up in a hot sweat thinking about at night. And I will try at least to answer those if they're Egyptologically based. So thank you to everyone who sent in questions in advance. I will try to answer them. Hi to Matt Jaffran, regular viewer, also a researcher who has booked his research visit for November. Matt, who is a paleontologist, someone who deals with pre-dynastic palettes, asks, Campbell, what is your favourite pre-dynastic object from the Manchester Museum collection? So when we say pre-dynastic, what do we mean? Ancient Egypt, Pharaonic Egypt, is usually defined by being the state, if we can talk about the state, under pharaonic rule, so the rule of a single pharaoh. So the pharaoh is the king. The pharaoh is part of a lineage of kings that we call dynasties. And when I say dynasty, I don't mean these kind of big shoulder-padded 1980s soaps with Joan Collins. I mean a royal house, a royal family, a lineage of rulers. And so Egypt is ruled by a series of dynasties. They're numbered by the time of Manetho in the last couple of centuries BCE, 31. There are 31 dynasties we know of, ending in the Ptolemies, and the Ptolemies end with Cleopatra VII. And after she pops her clogs, self-inflicted or otherwise, Egypt becomes part of the Roman Empire. So that's the dynastic period, the time of royal houses. But the pre-dynastic period, you might guess, is the time before there is a single unified state, if we can talk about the state in Egypt, before there is a single king. So that is a time before 3000 BCE, some 5,000 plus years ago. So Matt is asking, what's my favorite object from that period? Well, Matt, as you know, we have a very considerable and internationally significant collection of material of pre-dynastic date. And as often happens, because I was asked about this morning, and I was looking in our archives this afternoon, I can say my current favorite object, Matt, is one that you've just inquired about. This is one of these palettes, so very thin in profile, beautifully carved into a kind of ibex sort of thing, gazelle. But as Matt knows, this may not in fact have been the original shape of this piece, because often these palettes, often perhaps misguidedly interpreted as cosmetic palettes on which to grind and mix potentially eye pigment. These may, as Matt's research has shown, have had other uses, sonic uses. They could have been used percussively to make sounds. They're a common feature of Nagada II pre-dynastic burials, upwards of 6,000 years ago. People who were important, as far as we can tell, were buried with these kinds of things. And a very common form for one of these slate, or rather grey-wacky palettes, grey stone palettes, a common form for these is fish, with a little indication of a tail at the end. This does seem to have been originally fish-shaped, and it's been carved into this very intricate and rather less utilitarian for a pre-dynastic Egyptian shape of the ibex. And I wonder, and I think Matt wonders the same, whether perhaps this form was, it's an ancient object, but it's been recarved to make it more saleable to tourists. And this is something that happens a lot in museums. It happens a lot in Egyptology. You have an object, perhaps not one from an absolutely secure archaeological context, that has been adapted, that has been edited, that has been altered, that has been changed in some way. And that change tends to be to make it more appealing to buyers. And so the art market, the sale, the purchase and sale of antiquities is a very big one. It has been for several centuries. So if you can make an object seem maybe more Egyptian, more interesting, more valuable, more intriguing, you do that. And that may have been what has happened here, because the outline and the material are consistent for one of these fish-shaped palettes. But in fact, this piece has been recarved in more recent times, thinking perhaps the last 150 years. So, Matt, in answer to your question, what's your favourite pre-dynastic object? Yes, it may have been adapted in more recent times, but good chance that originally started life as a fish-shaped palette from a pre-dynastic grave. The other piece, which I absolutely love, I don't even have an illustration of it here. It's in my book, Pocket Museum Ancient Egypt, $12.95 from all good retailers, published by Thames and Hudson, is the so-called Hippo Bowl. It's a beautiful seaware, seaware, a very distinctive type of ceramic, not D-ware. D-ware is decorated ware, but seaware has a white cross-hatched, often, decoration on it, hence the name seaware, given by Petrie, Flinders Petrie. But it is decorated with hippos around the edge of the bowl, 4 hippos. And hippos, we tend to think of as cuddly, cute creatures, as I'm often fond of saying. Hungry, Hungry Hippos is a popular game still. But on a dark night, you don't want to meet a hippo, because a hippo is still one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. And so the Egyptians witnessed the fearsomeness and also the fearsome apotropaic protectiveness of the hippo, and wanted to channel that into material culture that would effect that level of protection and divine power for the person who owned the object. So the Hippo Bowl is an absolute prize piece of pre-dynastic pottery in the Manchester collection. It's currently on loan to our friends in Wigan Museum and Art Gallery, so you can go to Wigan to see it. And you'll be able to see it here when we reopen towards the end of next year, the end of 2022. For those local to Manchester, just to shout out to you, we will be closing to the public at the end of this week. And then, regardless of COVID restrictions, we will be completely closed until the end of next year. So for more than 1 year's time. So we can complete the building works, the installation of new galleries, new objects, very exciting stuff. And you can follow us on all the usual social media channels. You can see them, comment on them. If you're online, you can see them. Just Google Manchester Museum. Hello, Future. That's a good way to talk about the project. It's about looking to the future. So, Matt, in answer to your question, Hippo Bowl, I don't have it here to illustrate, but certainly since you asked about it, this wonderful, over 5,000-year-old, recarved pre-dynastic palate is a favorite. Another Matthew asks, hi Matthew, regular viewer Matthew, who's studying at the University of Manchester. Hello. This is a great question, and it kind of comes in two parts. Matthew asks, is there any evidence? And remember, as Matthew is perhaps aware of, this month and last month, we are doing things on a nature theme. And so I was, Jamie asks, who would you consider the most maligned person in Egyptian history? We'll come back to that. Matthew may be aware of the nature connection, and so asking about animals is particularly welcome. So Matthew asks, is there any evidence of animals kept in captivity, i.e. zoos or menageria, or domestic animals as pets or companions? Well, okay, animals in captivity. The evidence that comes to mind, I think, for most Egyptologists, is the extraordinary stuff coming out of the site of Hierakonpolis in the south of Egypt, south of Thebes. Very important pre-dynastic site, city of the falcon, city of home city of the falcon god Horus, the god of kingship. And it was there, this kind of crucible of the pharaonic ideal, the pharaonic visual culture, material culture, that there seem to have been big animals, lions, hippos, being held in some kind of captivity. At least there's evidence of the burial of these animals. So it's difficult to prove, animals in captivity. If you think of all the tens of millions of animal mummies we've got, we don't actually have much evidence of the captivity that might have supplied that amount of animal material for the embalmers. So it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to prove archaeologically. But in terms of domestication for pets, this is a hobby horse of mine, and I've just been writing a little bit about it. I think people perceive the notion of pets as something particularly associated with ancient Egypt. Pets are a largely Western conceit. If you think of fluffy house cats and dogs on leads, where you go walking around picking up their leavings, traces and leavings of dogs, which are absolutely anathema to me. I would never have a pet dog. I'd never have a pet anything. I much prefer mummified animals. But this idea of the domesticated animal, of course, there's a range, there's a spectrum. If you want to keep down rats, of course, you may keep cats as a way to tackle the rat problem. And there are reasons to have hunting dogs, for example, particularly, if you're trying to control what's going on in the hunt. But our idea, largely Western idea of pets, doesn't seem to map directly onto ancient Egyptian ideas. And there is very little evidence, Matthew, of pets held. There's a prince, the eldest son of Amenhotep III, Crown Prince Thutmose, who, had he lived, would have been Thutmose V, but his brother Akhenaten eventually came to the throne, Amenhotep IV. Had Prince Thutmose lived, who knows, history might have been different, but he's known to have had a pet cat. A cat he was fond of, called the Cat, was the cat's name, and it had a nice stone sarcophagus. But these are few and far between, these examples of animals that could possibly fit the description of pets. So there are evidences, I guess, from Hierakonpolis of some kind of possible zoo menagerie. There is passing reference, if we believe it, to animals, kind of exotic animals in the so-called botanical garden of Thutmose III at Karnak. Next time you're at Karnak, have a look towards the Middle Kingdom part of the temple, where there's illustrations of flora and fauna. Whether these are kind of anything like documentary examples of things that were actually seen, or whether they are copies of other copies. Oh, mind the alarm. Pardon. Sorry about that. There are copies of alarms. There are not copies of alarms. They may be copies of other documents. We can't say for sure whether anything on I mean, people imagine what is on Egyptian temple walls is some kind of reflection of reality. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not. It is of a different order. It's of a different register. It is not meant to represent simple reality. So for a menagerie, it's fun to talk about this orientalizing notion of the despotic pharaoh and his menagerie. That may not be real, as my PhD supervisor would have phrased it. Simply not real. So not a lot of evidence, certainly not a lot for pets, although we tend to be very intrigued by whatever surviving evidence there is. So thanks again for the good question, Matthew. This is a little left of field, but I rather like it. The wonderful people at the Egypt Exploration Society, a charity based in the UK supporting the work of preserving, promoting, supporting Egyptian heritage, Egypt Exploration Society. Check them out on Google. They'll be running a course about the worst jobs in ancient Egypt at some point in the very near future. And the course tutor, Dr. Sarah Doherty, writes in to say, what was the worst job, in your opinion, Campbell? So, Sarah, I've had a thought about this. Now, we've got a lovely document known as known colloquially amongst Egyptologists as the Satire of the Trades, which lists all the jobs that aren't a scribe, basically, aren't a literate, elite, soft-fingered writer and communicator and copyist of texts. And if you're not a scribe, you're kind of pretty lowly. And so there are defamatory descriptions of soldiers, of artisans, of potters. Sarah knows this very well, having written extensively about potters. My personal favorite worst job, best worst job in ancient Egypt is, if you've ever been to the unfinished obelisk in the quarries, the granite quarries at Aswan, in the south of Egypt, you'll know it's pretty hot in Aswan, even in the winter. There are little patches where people have used pounders of harder material than the granite, which is, I don't know, dolerite or something, really hard, and they've been pounding away all day. To be a pounder of stone in a granite quarry in Aswan doesn't sound like much fun. Not simply because it's physically hard, but because you don't see much progress in a day, I'd imagine. I've never pounded granite myself, but I imagine it's not terribly rewarding. Yeah, I guess when the obelisk is erected, if you've survived that long and you see it being put in place, although I suspect most non-elite people wouldn't get to see these sort of things, or if they did, it would be at quite a distance, quite a remove. So, Sarah, I would say a pounder of stone, a quarryman at the quarry face in a granite quarry, would be my personal worst job. I don't know what specific detail is given about quarrying in the Satire of the Trades. I forget. But that would be my own worst job. And then, sort of connected to that, I mentioned the Satire of the Trades. Raska, hi Raska on Twitter, asks, what did formal education look like in ancient Egypt? What sort of thing did they learn at school or university? Well, of course, the idea of a university is a sort of a modern concept, and so is really the idea of a school. In these broadcasts, I've talked before about apprenticeship, how you might actually learn writing, how you might learn to copy, how you might learn to form hieroglyphs, how you might learn kind of artistic skills, how you might ultimately learn to compose your own texts at the most kind of learned end of the spectrum of literacy. This seems to be by direct apprenticeship, and there's a strong sense of this in ancient Egyptian texts, where the son apprentices with the father and follows in the family trade. So if your father is a scribe, you would be learning in that fashion. Archaeological evidence for a school where people are sat down and instructed is vanishingly small. Okay, there may be some trial pieces or what look like kind of exercises found together, but there could be a domestic context for that. You could be learning at home. And the idea of the office or the school, I find a little bit difficult. But then there are, thinking about the evidence we have from text, there's a composition called the Kemit or the compilation, which seems to be targeted at teaching novices the kind of the nice way of writing, the nice way of expressing yourselves, vocabulary, ways of expression, these kind of things that would make you part of that literate scribal elite. And of course, that was an ambition, certainly, for well-to-do people, the very small number of well-to-do people in ancient Egypt. So there would be a sort of a syllabus in terms of, written expression, written culture, but there's also, of course, knowledge about measurement and about mathematics. So that might form a part of the curriculum. Certainly practical rather than abstract maths. How do you calculate the volume of something, or the circumference or something, or a little bit of what we might call trigonometry applied to potentially things like building. And then that, I guess, gets onto a slightly what we would call more artistic range of skills that might be part of the syllabus. So if you're a sesh kedut, you are literally a scribe of forms, often translated outline draftsman. And so people are being taught in those what we would call artistic skills, but they may equally have skills in what we would think of as writing. Because remember, the hieroglyphic script is a pictorial script, and these two domains of knowledge and activity and society, of elite society, would feed into one another. What is written, what is painted, what is drawn, these are two linked areas. But thank you for the question, Raska. That's a good one. Worth answering again. So, Jamie, I think you did. Oh, I can actually go back. I can actually go back and see all the people that have joined. Hi, everyone. What would you consider? Who would you consider the most maligned person in Egyptian history? Well, I guess if someone were really maligned, Jamie, they would be simply stricken from the record. And I wonder how many people we are simply missing because they were completely expunged. But you have people like Hatshepsut. You have people like Akhenaten, who were definitely the subject of targeted campaigns. And I have often said this in these kind of broadcasts. If you look at non-royal monuments, non-royal tombs, people fall from grace, if that's what happened, a lot. People are deliberately attacked a lot. Who is the number one person? I mean, I would love to say he's a personal favourite of mine, our friend Senenmut, high official under Queen Hatshepsut. He gets at least partially expunged. I can't really show you here, but behind me, there's a rather beaten up example of one of his statues, perhaps deliberately attacked. We know lots of them were. And we know of 26 of the statues. The 26th one was found in the room behind me only a few years ago, identified only a few years ago. So if we know of 26 statues of this guy who was deliberately maligned, how many more did he have originally, given the depredations of time, 3,500 years, and a potentially targeted campaign of erasure against him, against Senenmut. So Senenmut would be my answer. Jamie, so thank you for all your questions. Sorry it took a little longer to get started. As I say, the museum is closing to the public at the end of this week. We have events beginning this evening, later openings. I think all the tickets are taken for that, but if you rock up, maybe there's a chance you could make it in. So yeah, just follow us on social media at Egypt MCR, at Manchester Museum. And I look forward to seeing you next month, the end of September, last Thursday of the month, when I'll be happy to take your questions again. So with that, I'll say thank you very much and join us again.